Hello, welcome to another episode of Zed Decoded, and today's topic is, as you can see here, Zed on Linux. So a lot of you have been asking about the Linux version of Zed, or in your words, you were asking Linux when. So we're here to give you a little update. Zed for Linux is not released yet, but we want to give you insight into what the current state is, what has already been done, what is still left to be done, how it works, what doesn't work, and to demonstrate that it already works pretty well. We're doing this live on my Linux machine, but since it isn't even an alpha version, things might get wrong in this recording, so we might have to restart it. Who knows? We'll do it live. And with me today is Mikayla, who's been at Zed for, I don't know, how long have you been at Zed? Like 2 years?
I
One
think
year?
about 2 years. It was like summer 2022, I think I joined as an intern. So it's been
Nice.
been a hot second. I
Yeah.
think only Nate has joined earlier than I have at this point.
In terms of Zed, you're a lifer. Like you've been here a long, long time, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as much as can be said for like a 3-year-old company, I guess. I guess you could say
Yeah.
that.
2/3. Okay, so and Michaela is here because Michaela um, jumped on the Linux build. So start of the year when I joined, the next big milestone was the open sourcing of Zed and GPUI, our UI framework. And then after that milestone, Michaela said she's going to work on the Linux port. And Michaela, correct me if I'm wrong, but you haven't done any Linux native development before, but you did jump in with motivation and curiosity, and now we have a running Linux version. That's correct, right?
Yes, my closest experience with Linux before this was SSHing into shared servers for random WordPress websites and stuff like that. So, I
Nice.
got figured out how to quit Vim doing that, but that's about as far as I got with the whole world of Linux. So, jumping into this has been a very interesting project because I've used the MacBook my whole life, and it was half like learning the platform, half learning VS Code, and then half doing my job. And so it was quite the experience running into that. Yeah,
Yeah.
all those different pieces.
So I also have only done small Linux native things, at least UI stuff. And so I know some things, but that also means both of us are, you know, these are fresh eyes that are looking at this build of the Z Linux, except Michaela has seen more. But there's lots of questions to answer. But before we get to a question, so I want to show this to everybody. So this is Z on Linux, right? So like here, this is GNOME. There's no faking here. This is Linux. I don't know how else to prove it. Here, there you go. You name A. You name A. There you go. This is Ubuntu. Zed runs on it. This is a release build of Zed. Here, collaboration. You can see Michaela's cursor. We're sharing a session here. I can scroll up and down. It's pretty fast. It's snappy. What's another file? Editor element. There you go. That already works. I think the built-in terminal also works.
It does work, but you're collaborating, so
Oh, there you
it's
go. Right,
it
right,
works
right.
on my side. It works on my side of the
Right.
connection. We haven't built the collaborative terminal yet. Something I
Here,
also
new
am
Z
very interested
window.
in.
Look, here, there it is. You name
There it
A.
is.
Boom. So that works. The project panel works. A lot of stuff works. Like I tried out the Linux build the first time 2-3 weeks ago, and I was blown away by how much stuff already works. So for everybody out there, you can like here, where's my terminal? You can clone Z here. There you go. Clone this, and then you can cargo run dash dash release, and that's gonna take a while. It's gonna make your fans spin faster, but this is gonna give you a release build of Z that is not slow or sluggish, and that's kind of the
Yeah.
intro. So the first
Yeah,
question
and
I have, yeah,
I use Zed like whenever I'm working on Linux, I use Zed on Linux. There like you were just saying, there's still pre-alpha, still stuff working on it. It's still stuff to work on, but every single time I'm writing code on Linux, it's in Zed now. Um,
Yeah.
though sometimes I have to be a little tricky with which exact version I'm running in case I've added a bug or something like that.
Yeah, I've been using it too here, like without any problems, basically. But we'll get to the problems of what's still missing. But first off, here's the naive question that maybe somebody is asking themselves right now, and that is, and I think it came up in Slack before. The question is, Rust, with which Zed is built, is a cross-platform language, and I think the Rust community and the Rust language contributors, they pay a lot of attention to cross-platform compatibility. So explain to us, Mikayla, why isn't Zed or wasn't Zed out of the box working on all of the platforms when it was released, which is what a lot of people are asking for. Why not Windows support? Why not Linux support? Like, why? What was missing? Why didn't it work on Linux?
So Rust's cross-platform story is rock solid. At no point in this process have we ever had trouble with Rust. Rust is amazing. I'm a Rustacean and all that sort of stuff. The problem has really been in all of the non-Rust APIs that you have to integrate with. Like on macOS, we use like Cocoa and NSViews and stuff like that to create our windows, because that's what you do on macOS. And
This
on
type of stuff here, right? Like where we
Mhm.
here, this is where we do Cocoa, and we built
Yeah.
like a native app and
It's
whatnot.
actually super cool. It's kind of like it kind of feels like writing Objective C and also writing Rust, but kind of like interspersed in a weird way. It's very cool.
Yeah.
But beside the point. And so when you're talking about writing a GUI application, the problem is a lot harder than just compiling because you need to work with the platform APIs for creating windows and stuff like that. Linux is even harder in that respect because not only do you have to target the platform and the platform norms, you also have two different windowing like compositors to work with. You have Wayland and you have X11, and they're both great and they both have problems, and it's just kind of a lot of stuff is happening with both of them. As an example, I'm don't quote me on this, but like some of the text input stuff that we use that we want to use for IME and stuff in Zed. So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
lots of different languages can be put in. It's last I checked, it was unstable APIs and stuff like that, and that's fine. And those can be very widely supported. But it's also like there's more decisions to be made there.
So
With
that
that,
means to jump in, like you said the platform dependent APIs. That is, you said creating windows, right? That's one, like making a window show up on the screen. Then the other thing you mentioned input, right? How keyboard events or keyboard, how the keyboard is handled, how the mouse is handled. I would assume like scrolling. What else? Like, does anything else come to mind? Like platform specific stuff?
anytime you're talking to the operating system and it's not supported by and it's not basic file stuff, so you could libc is there's a version of it everywhere, right? So most people, you can open a file, you can close a file, and it's the same ish everywhere ish. But anything else that you want to do that integrates with your operating system, you need to speak that operating system's language. So as an example, when you have little pop-ups, right, that pop up a little file explorer, so you can go select which folder you want.
Got it.
We have to talk to the files.
This,
We have
if
to
I
talk to the operating
do,
system.
oh, can I do this? Can I?
I think
How do I?
it's Control Shift O. Nope.
Control Shift
Control
O
O.
doesn't.
Control O.
Control O doesn't do it. Oh, did I overwrite it?
Oh,
Oh, because it's a Vim binding too, right? Can I
yes. So if you
see?
run
There you
the
go.
workspace open, it should.
This, right?
Yep. That.
So
Exactly.
that's the platform native. This is my GNOME GTK file opening dialog, right? Yeah. So you need to integrate with
And
this. Can we, out of interest, can we find the code for this, like that triggers this?
yes. Let me see. So we go to client. I think.
Workspace
Let
open.
me see. We want to go to GPY Linux.
Workspace open.
Are you on X11? I think you're on X11, right?
X11, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Let's see. So we should go into
Is it?
X11 client, or so there's one of two places here. There's a common Linux area that we have that works for that does a lot of things that we can do. Prompts for paths. Okay, yeah, actually, okay, so never mind. We don't actually need to go there. So
Yeah.
what we want to go to is GPUI, source platform, Linux platform. And right here, we just create this request. Under the hood, this is using a under the hood, this is using a library called Aperture Science Handheld Portal Device, which is a kind of nice, fancy Rust wrapper over this other API called like dbus. I'm pretty sure. I haven't actually
Debus.
worked with this code too much beyond getting like, oh, there's a thing. It's called dbus. It's the thing you use to call it. But
Yeah.
this will generate a request and then get the response through that API for us in a nice Rust fashion. I haven't dug too
Got
much
it.
deeper beyond being like, oh, cool, it works. All right, let me go learn the next API.
Got it.
But yeah, that's the code right here that runs it. And this is again cross Wayland and X11 due to the way dbus works. So it's
So
not part of your compositor.
when I look at the file name, I see GPUI, which is our UI framework. Then I
Hmm.
see platform/Linux/platform, and then it's
Hmm.
impl platform. So platform is, I assume, it's a trait, right?
Hmm.
So this, I guess, the platform will, if we go to the definition of platform, it will tell us what is different between Linux and macOS. Is that correct? Like from the Zed, the application perspective.
Roughly, these are the things that we want to talk to. These are the APIs. These are like basically like functions we want to call that we have to integrate with the platform to get. So as an
Yeah.
example, right, to get
Yeah.
the monitors that you have, right,
Yes.
we can't do that in Zed. We have to ask, the Mac
Yeah.
OS or the
Exactly.
Windows
Yeah. Yeah.
APIs or whatever.
And you also can
Um,
do that in Rust, right? Like Rust, even though it's cross-platform, just go back to that point. It doesn't give you anything like this. This is, like you have to decide
yeah.
how you want to do this, because I think even on macOS there's multiple ways to do this, and I bet on Linux there's, I guess, a bajillion different ways to do this. X11 Wayland. So here's
Yeah, and let's
how.
not even talk about Windows. Like,
Yeah, that's,
let's
yeah,
not
it's a,
even get there.
yeah, just the Linux episode. Yeah.
Hmm.
So displays, primary window, active window, open window appearance. This is we're
Yeah,
trying to
this
figure
is
out
like
this.
dark mode and light mode stuff.
Got it.
Um,
Got it.
yeah.
Open URL. This is
Hmm.
interesting, right?
Hmm. So that will make
URL
it so
style.
that whatever that URL will be open in your
Mm,
browser or whatever, which usually it needs a little bit of platform support to get it routed to the right spot.
yeah. So then we have all of these. What is okay? URLs, a prompt for path. That's what we just looked at, right? Where
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
ask, like, this is reveal path. This is open in Finder or your file explorer, I guess, right?
Hmm. Yep.
Callbacks when a window becomes active or not.
These callbacks are
Menus.
super
Yeah.
super important. They're kind of the core of how most of the events exist in Zed, right? So like these on become active and on resign active will to be turned into, window focused,
Yeah.
window blurred kind of events and stuff like that. So the that anytime you see these ones prefixed with on, they're they're doing something
Callbacks.
important.
Okay, so then we have the menus, cursor style, interesting. Primate clipboard, there you go.
Hmm.
Um,
So one thing,
yeah,
one
yeah, go ahead.
interesting thing here is that there's a couple of these that are non transferable. Sorry, not transferable.
Right. Non-cross
Uh,
platform, right?
non cross platform, but they're in the cross platform thing.
Yeah.
Uh, let's see. There's another one in here somewhere. Oh no, that's on a different thing. Yeah. So
But
One,
just to say this out loud, right? Like on Linux, you can have multiple you have multiple clipboards, right? On Linux, if you select, wait, let me demonstrate this maybe. If you select text, it gets put in the clipboard. That if you select text, you can then paste it by clicking your mouse wheel, and then if you just select text and then hit in the terminal, you hit Control Shift C and then Control Shift V, and then this is the normal clipboard. But so you have two clipboards, and on macOS you only have one, right? So this is,
yes.
I guess, where
And
this is
somebody,
coming from.
yes, and an enterprising member of the community, and I don't have their name up right now, but I should find it. Actually added all of this stuff into Zed, so
Here,
it should the
Apico
primary
Bucket
clipboard.
28.
Yep, that's them. They're they're
Yeah.
they're they're lovely. They've been adding a bunch of PRs, just getting a lot of these like fine detail work in. So it should work. It might work on main rather than on this build. I can't quite remember
Yeah.
where things are, but it should be working. Um, but
So
yes.
then going down the stack, so we have this abstraction about of the platform. It's abstracted away. And if I look at, I mean, it says 4 months ago, but correct me if I'm wrong, this abstraction has been in the Z code base for a long time, right? It wasn't that Zed was unaware of other platforms. It was just, we put this abstraction, but we only work on macOS, with the idea being that at some point we will have support for Windows and Linux. Is that correct? Like that this has been a thing?
Yes, that's exactly like ever since day one that I've been here. The GPUI, the framework we're looking at, it has had this platform abstraction baked into it.
Yeah.
That Yeah, so we've been prepared to architecturally start working on cross-platform support since day one. At
Yeah.
least as far as I know. It's just there's a lot more to cross-platform support than just the traits as well. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
like, and I think that's where a lot more of the work has been going on because macOS and Windows kind of give you like a full UI framework that is the way you do everything in them, whereas Linux is a little more bring your own, build your own. And so there's
Yeah.
a little more. One of the big things I've been working on is just rebuilding a lot of stuff that the Mac platform like provides by default.
Okay. So let's dive in a little bit here. So let's say we take an easy one, like open URL, right? If we say go to implementation, or sorry, find all references. I think these are the implementations. We have, well, the GPUI app, which is the concept of GPUI, calls the platform open URL, and then under the hood we have test and Linux, but we also should have one for Mac. Oh, is
So
it
it's not compiled
conditional
in.
compilation? Ah,
Yeah, so it probably won't
there
be
you go.
showing up in there. We can search it
So
though. If we
yeah,
search, that's something I usually do to get around that.
here if we search fn open URL, here Windows. There's this one. Where is the Mac? There you go, platform Mac. So let's see how the Mac does it. So here we do an NSURL, which is the Objective-C or Cocoa framework type. You create an URL, and then you send to the NS workspace the message or the method open URL. So that hands it over to macOS. And it basically does the same thing as if you were to, I don't know, click on a URL in Safari, and then it asks, what's your default browser? What's your URL handler? All of this type of stuff. So this is basically where the Z rubber hits the platform road, right? This is where we hand
Exactly.
control over. So then when we go back and let's see the Linux implementation, I'm interested because opening URLs is not that easy, I remember, on Linux. Like, there's different ways to do it. So here we say open URL, and then this is a good name, open that. So what is open? Open is a crate, uses the library to open a path using a program configured. in a non-blocking fashion. So this is, I guess, a crate that abstracts this away.
Yeah, on Linux. And it seems like a pretty thin abstraction. If you see there's these commands here that it
Yeah.
fundamentally drops into, and it looks like it try it it generates a bunch of commands like xdg open, geo open, kde open, and stuff like that for various platforms.
Okay.
And then it just tries to run
Tries
them.
them.
Yeah, it tries them.
Okay.
Waits till one works.
Yeah. And yeah, this, I guess this is the, I'm doing the air quotes here. This is the problem with Linux, in that there's always more than one way to do something, right? There's, you have not only different distributions, you not only have different compositors like X11 and Wayland, you also have different desktop environments like GNOME and KDE. I think GIO, I think this is even a GNOME thing or glib thing. So these are kind of related, but there's two different ones. And then you have XDG Open, which is like XDG. What does it stand for? Is it it's a standard, right? I don't know.
Yes, I
Doesn't matter, but it's a thing, right? So
yeah, I want to say it's like
not that easy.
cross desktop group. Okay, I thought it had to do with X. No, it's just
Yeah.
cross desktop group. Yeah.
So then I see these here, these to-dos, which brings me to my next question. When working on Linux, was it just, again, doing the air quotes, the just, because it wasn't just or wasn't simple, but was the work, again, sorry, just filling out these to-dos and filling out these platform methods, or like, hiding a window or activating a window? Did it turn out at some point that these abstractions on Linux do not make sense at all, and that the platform tray that we have, it doesn't match Linux? Like where you have this feedback loop of, oh, I think this is how they will all work, and then you work on one, and it, of course, that works like you thought it would. Then you work on the second one, turns out the abstraction is wrong. Did any of this happen in your experience?
So honestly, not really, not too often. Like there were a few places, like figuring out like there's like the places where it mainly happened are in small ways. Like the Wayland doesn't have a concept of a primary display, so we just can't
Okay.
provide that API. You know,
So if we
so
dive
I
in
had to
here,
yeah, I had to make that into an option as an example. So there, but that's a very small scale change.
interesting.
The other big incompatibility I noticed is that the Mac platform does a lot of stuff for us. As one example, you can't resize the windows on Linux yet. So it'll preview for what we'll talk about later. But we have to personally define like the areas you can grab, and then send events to Wayland saying, oh hey, the user from this event is wanting to
Yeah.
in our context that means the user wants to create a resize event over there, right? So there's been more work there's been more work on the Linux client side, and there's been a little bit of fiddling with the APIs, but I would say largely our abstraction hasn't been a problem because it's a very, very thin abstraction. Like
Yeah.
if we look at platform again, the generic one, right? There's like what, 30 methods in here, and
Yeah.
half of them are trivial, like
Yeah.
OS name, OS version. Like honestly, some of these shouldn't even be here. And and some of them are fine. And then like write to primary and write to clipboard, right? Like these are basically the same API
Yeah.
under
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
hood. It's just calling which one. So it's when I say 30 or 40 methods, it sounds like a lot, but it's really not
It's
a
not.
lot.
Yeah.
It's a very thin abstraction, and that means that we don't have to have a lot of effort to make that to fit to that abstraction. We just need to make sure, when a mouse event happens, we get it to you. When you want to open a URL, we try to open the URL, and we keep moving. Most of the interesting stuff going on in Zed is or in GPUI is all in Rust and all in Rust land, which means it's already cross-platform by default.
So But there's one big chunk in Zed that is platform specific, and then that I would say is the renderer. And
Mm-hmm.
on macOS, we have a metal renderer, meaning metal. The metal is the API. The GPU. This is how you can access the GPU to render
Mm-hmm.
stuff on the Mac. And if here in platform Mac, we have this metal renderer. And
Mm-hmm.
then here, metal renderer, blah, blah, blah. This is super, super macOS specific because there's no equivalent. Well, there's an equivalent, but there's no metal on Linux, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how does that work on Linux? Where does the renderer come into play? And what is the renderer under Linux?
So for the Linux renderer, we are supremely lucky, and we have a very fantastic community. Right after we did the open source launch, this guy, you know, showed up in like our GitHub or Discord or something like that, or made a PR. I can't remember exactly how it happened. His name's Dimitri. He worked on a bunch of WGPU and GFX and stuff. So a bunch of graphic stuff in Rust for a very long time. And he had been building his own renderer called Blade for a while, which is kind of stripping down a lot of the, because like WGPU is trying to be a very all-encompassing project that like does optimal scheduling and does all this sort of stuff. And Blade is like, what if you just didn't worry about that and we just kind of did the really straightforward part really, really well. And that fit with kind of the Zed ethos and the Zed way of doing that. And it was already cross-platform. It already supported a bunch of different things and stuff like that. A bunch of like Windows and Linux and even the web and stuff like that with WebGL. And so he just kind of showed up and wrote most of it. And
Okay.
it was super cool to see. If we want to look at it, we can go
Yeah,
look up
I'll
here
follow you.
at,
Let's see, like where we call. What's the entry point? Like if you pop off like one higher up in the stack, like where
Mhm.
do we construct the new renderer?
So if I remember correctly, that should be, it's not uncommon.
Well, I guess is
Actually,
it
it's
in
a good question. I haven't
platform?
looked at this in a while, in a hot
Let's
second.
figure this out. I was wondering about this right now in just now in
Yeah, so we have
where
this
was
Blade
it?
renderer,
Metal renderer,
new.
new renderer.
I
What is
think,
this? Like,
you
tell me
know, okay, I think I
references.
remember. I think we do this. I think we do this in the. I got it. I think we do this in the
I'll follow you.
Wayland initialization code because it needs to get the pointers to all this stuff.
Oh,
Let me.
so GPUI platform says give me a new window, and then under the hood, like the GPUI, the abstraction is the window, and that does the rendering.
Uh,
Random
let
class.
me let me get you let me get you a correct answer rather than
Yeah,
guessing. Apologies there.
no worries. Blade
So,
renderer.
one second. Like we said, still in alpha.
Yeah,
Just crashed there for me.
yeah. It did. Oh,
Yep,
there you
it
go.
did.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yep, there you go.
Yep.
So let
So
me
I
get back my.
close and rejoin. There you go. This is
Oh yeah, so that's another part. Linux actually didn't have version of this UI, interestingly enough, and so one thing I had to add to GPUI was just the ability to just kind of replace it with our own
okay.
GPUI rendered version. Um,
All right. So if I close that and then, oh, I think this crashed. Did it crash? No, it's still here. Can I call
if
like
you click
this?
on quick cancel or close window, maybe.
Now it's gone. Now it's gone.
Okay.
All right. So let me restart it. Here you go, Z preview. There you go. Let's wait for this. Oh, I think it's gonna boot up Rust Analyzer on my side. It is also the spinner. This is a new spinner that I've never seen. Interesting. All right, so you are in our Zed Decoded. There you go.
Hmm.
I'll rejoin you. There you go. But you said I can't resize windows, but I can resize windows. It looks a little. Doesn't look good, but I think X.
X11, X11 is Wayland. You can't resize the windows. X11
Yeah,
is a
that's
little
yeah,
more, little more
nice.
helpful by default. Okay, so it wasn't the
X11
client
hold
initial.
out.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I kind of enjoy writing the X11 code a little bit more, just because it's a little more like straightforward, and I like that. But it also Wayland does more stuff, so it's like, anyway. So your
The
question about the
renderer.
blade renderer,
Where
we
do we
started on
construct the
each window.
renderer?
We constructed on each window. I knew I was looking the right, and I was not looking at the general client thing. Every time we create a new window, we get a bunch of pointers to the basic, like a bunch of C pointers to the window and the display, and then we create a new GPU context, um, which is kind of
What's
how
GPU?
the
Is that our Blade graphics? Oh, GPU comes from Blade. Got it.
Yep, yep. This is all Blade stuff, and then we also create this like extent, which is just kind of like the
The
size, and
size.
then we call Blade renderer new right here, and this kind of
Got it.
does the interesting stuff from there.
Talks to the GPU and renders. So how do we then interact with this? If I find references from the
So
render,
if you go here, this
display.
is kind of the main entry point for the renderer. Like
Got
there's a
it.
couple of
Ah,
like
I
life
see.
cycle things, but basically the way GPUI works, right, is that every time a frame comes in, we start with a window, start at the root view, right, and we go down we call that root view's render function, right? This render function is recursive, right? So it will it might have subviews that it calls render functions on. It might have function calls that it calls out into and stuff like that. Bunch of stuff happens, right? As all of this compiles down over the course of the frame into this one scene object right here. This scene kind of has all of the stuff we asked for. So as you're going through Zed, you talk about a button, right? But a button is composed of like two rectangles, and maybe one of them has a rounded corner, and maybe one of them is like a different color or something like that. And all of that gets just compiled into just this list of quads, a list of underlines, a list of monochrome sprites, and we build up this data structure, and then the Blade renderer breaks it down and turns it into an actual 8 pixels you see on the screen.
So the scene is still like, just to be clear here, this is still fully platform independent, right? This is just primitives, like a shadow. What's a shadow? I'm sure it's just, there you go. It's a bunch
Yeah,
of
it's just some
numbers,
data.
basically, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
it's
just
like
data. A quad. What's a quad? Order pad. Let's look at the quad real quick. There you go. Bounds, which is like you know, the size
it's a
of it, or
rectangle with a position.
yeah, content mask, background color, border color, corner radius, or radii, border width, and then padding, and then jumping up. Here we again have an abstraction, right? Platform window, which has also been here for a while. So platform window is a GPUI concept, and on Mac we have one implementation of a platform window, and then I assume on Linux we have multiple implementations, like for Wayland and for X11. And
Yep,
then this
we
is
do.
where again, where the data rubber hits the GPU road, I guess, right? You then call the renderer and say, draw this for me. That's all it does. All it does.
That's all it
There's
does.
a lot
Well,
happening. Yeah.
just all it does. There's
Yeah.
various bits and pieces here for like getting that, like converting that data into a format the GPU can read, uploading it into the GPU's data memory. Well, not uploading, but like sending it to
Yeah,
GPU
yeah.
memory.
So
Um, you
here we
know,
basically translate GPUI concepts into stuff that Blade understands, I guess.
Well, specifically what
And
our shaders understand, right? So there's this
yeah, oh, the shaders, yeah.
shaders.wgsl here. Um,
Mm-hmm. Let me find that.
and yes, so this, you know, just has a bunch of things. Let's go look at the quad. Oh, let's go look
So the
at the
shaders,
quad.
for those who don't know, the shaders are the
Hmm.
programs that run on a GPU. And
Yeah.
you basically upload them to a GPU, and then you send data to the GPU and say, take the program, take the data, and render something for me.
Yep. And these are super, super small programs that you run like roughly one program per pixel, sort
Mm-hmm.
of. But every single pixel is getting an individual run, all happening in parallel, all happening super, super fast because of that parallelism. But that
Mm-hmm.
parallelism kind of forces you to be a very different, very restricted context. And that's why we use these other languages to read about it or to write shaders.
So,
So,
so that means we had, like, Dimitri wrote new shaders for Blade, because we do have shaders
mhm.
for on Mac, right? Like,
Yep,
I think we do. They're shaders.
they're
They're
chewed up
written in
metal.
Metal, which is they have their own shaded language. I think Metal,
Hmm.
and then these are in a different language, and Dimitri also wrote them. So that's a big thing that had to be done, right? Do you
Yeah,
know
yeah.
how much overlap there is between these languages, or was it complete rewrite from scratch?
Um, little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. There's like
Yeah, yeah.
some, if I remember correctly, like so. I want to preface this with I'm not an expert in shaders at all. And
Yeah, me neither.
I was raring up to become one, and then Dimitri came in and did a lot of it. I'm like, great, now I can learn what Wayland is. Um,
Nice.
but
That's how open
there's
source
like
works. That's cool.
exactly, exactly. But there's different like primitives and expectations and a lot of like syntax differences. So you do end up having to rewrite most of it, but also, drawing a rectangle isn't super duper complicated, right? Like we're not like a video game where we have this like crazy three-dimensional, objects and like orcs running around and all this sort of stuff, right? We're just trying to
Mm.
draw a rectangle. So a lot of the stuff is like, if, as you can see, um, we have fairly straightforward shaders here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so yes, we did have to, so yes, it did have to be completely rewritten in basically a new language, but um, math is math, you know? um, so
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so to jump up the stack, and I'm looking at the time, and I also want to
Hmm.
ask you a bunch of other stuff, but that means we have Blade as the underlying thing to talk to the GPU on
Hmm.
Linux, and then I don't know if it's in the middle or on the side, we have these two other APIs, X11 and Wayland, that then we have to marry to Blade, and on top of that sits GPUI, our framework with the platform and the platform window abstracted away as good as we can, and the Z application code doesn't really have to worry about any of it, right? I know, for example, that
Basically.
I wrote this here inline git blame information that you see on my
Hmm.
screen right now, and I never ever had to think about Linux versus macOS, except when it comes to running Git, which is where again the rubber meets the road when you have to run
Yeah.
processes. But even that
Pretty much
was
the
not a problem.
pretty much the only thing that's had to change so far has been the title bar.
Yeah,
In
that's a
terms
big
of
one, right?
the Z code, because um, uh, and we're even working on making it better now. But
Can we see the
there's a
code? Is
more.
there?
Hmm?
Oh, you mean actual UI code like title bar? This component here,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
do you mean
There's a the collab title bar item or yes.
collab UI?
But
Is that?
I think, let me see. Title bar new. Yes, right here. Okay, so yeah, so it's actually in UI source components title bar. And
Oh,
this
here, there's
one,
you could, yeah,
yeah, and this one
yeah,
is special case for Windows and Linux and stuff like
yeah.
that. And there's to dos and things to work on here, and like we need to do menus. Like as an example, there's no menus
Yeah.
on any of the Linux stuff yet because we need to work on adding that. That's one of the things we're working on right now. Um, but
I
yeah,
mean,
this 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 UI has to change.
that's a good example, right? Because as long as you just draw in a rectangle, you can get away with ignoring the outside platform. But once you want to have, a custom UI that doesn't look like any other UI, and on macOS, the Zed application has a custom title bar. It doesn't look like another Mac app, for example. If you want to do that, then you have to implement it per platform, I guess, right? Here we can see some uh, Windows specific stuff, which is also a port that's worked on right now by the community. So that brings me to one of the things that I wanted to ask you. So, and maybe you don't have an answer yet, but I'm curious. On Linux, there's different desktop environments, and stuff looks different in different desktop environments. For example, here this is Ghosty, but if I open the GNOME terminal, this is a GTK application, and it has like this stuff in the title bar and whatnot. What's the plan for Zed? Do we want to look like a GTK application? Do we want to go in the direction of KDE? Do we want to stay away from all of this? What are your thoughts?
So this is honestly one of the hardest questions about Zed and Linux, and it actually goes much further than even the UI, right? Like when we pick, like when we're talking, one thing we've been talking about a lot, the Zed side is binary distribution. How do we build,
Yes.
bundle, and distribute Zed? And there's as many possibilities as there are opinions for these sorts of things. Um, and I'm still kind of I'm the way I've been approaching it is we're trying to fit in with the platform while still doing our own thing. So as an example, right, there's GTK themes. You can have themes that like redraw all your app and stuff like that. I have no plan to add or integrate with that. I'm actually trying, I want to
Yeah.
keep GTK out of the code base wherever possible, not because it's a bad project, just because like we already want to keep like a very small, like remember I was talking about the narrow platform abstraction, right? Like we want to keep that as narrow and small as possible. However, we also want to fit in. We want people to be comfy. We
Yeah.
want people come to Zed, they should feel like, oh yeah, this is homey. Oh, I'm like, I'm visiting someone else's place maybe, but it's still cozy. I still know how everything works. I still feel like
Yeah.
this is where I should be. So when it comes to very literal things, what I'm thinking is like doing a vaguely no like GTK nomish title bar, like have like some circles with buttons in the top right, um, and then kind of calling it there and kind of gesture in the direction of that, but not make too many commitments there. Because I've seen some people were showing me some various themes. Like you have like total conversion themes. You have themes that turn GTK into Windows, they'll turn it into Mac
Yeah.
OS and stuff
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that. Like even trying to support that, like isn't really like we're doing our own thing. We're trying to be our own application and write our own rules a little bit while still
Yeah.
being, as an example, putting the title bar buttons on the right instead of on the left. Whereas in macOS, they go on the left, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
I
trying
mean,
to
that's
trying to trying to
also
chart that path is an interesting one.
it's hard, right? Because you end up with this philosophical question of what is the native app for the platform. On macOS,
Hmm.
for example, people say, "Oh, Zed is a true native app, a true Mac app," and it feels native, but we don't, like we have the what's it called, the traffic lights, right? The red and the yellow and the green button to control the window in our window, but we have a custom title bar, which is not that common for most Mac apps, although I think Apple does it too with some of their apps. But it's a fine line to walk. Like, how do you make it feel native, but at the same time also, have concepts that are cross-platform and that also are manageable because,
Hmm.
if we had infinite time or had a magic wand, I guess we would snap our fingers and say, yes, we implement all native for KDE, for GTK, for,
Yeah.
whatever you want, but we can't, right? So
Yeah,
we
and
have to
that
walk the
that
line.
is that and that's like one of the big question marks in all this. And like
Mm.
I've like, you know, we've gone back and forth. I've gone back and forth on this a couple times. Like some people have
Yeah.
made PRs that just are like, yeah, let's render this GTK widget because it does the thing we need, like that
Yeah, yeah,
cancel
yeah.
close scene thing you saw there.
Yes,
GTK
yeah,
supports
code.
that, right?
Yeah.
We're taking on more work by trying to do our own thing. Um, but to solve this, the way we've done it on macOS so far is that we've tried to be like native where it counts. Basically, like on macOS, there's this emoji picker thing, right? There's a
Yeah,
standard
yeah,
key
yeah,
binding and you click it and it opens up a nice little emoji picker that Apple creates. We support that. We use,
yeah,
the platform little traffic lights in the top, right? And more
yeah,
than that, there's a ton of Emacs key bindings that all like Cocoa text input things support by default. So a lot of Emacs key
mm,
bindings just work on every Mac app. We have recreated most of them, if not all of them. Probably not all of them.
mm,
There's a lot of them. We've recreated most of those in Zed and made sure they work and they exist. And
yeah.
I think that's kind of what I'm going for. It's like native where it counts. Like, can you full screen? Does
Shortcuts.
it feel
Yeah.
right? Do the shortcuts work? Can we respect your
Mm,
settings? Like, that's probably going to be when we start pulling GTK in. It's just, hey, GTK, tell us what your settings are so we can read them. Or,
yeah.
hey, KDE, tell us what your settings are. Because I don't know if there's a dbus API for that yet. And if there is,
Okay.
though, we'll do that. Um, but yeah, that's kind of my philosophy is like native where it counts, focus on like the feel and the UX more than specific UI elements. And again, there's caveats here, right? Some people love the GTK themes, and that's what's really important to them. And we've chosen to do this. We can't cater to that yet.
Yeah.
Do we want to? I don't know. It's a judgment call, and we'll probably find out pretty soon as more people start using Linux and telling us what they think about
Yeah.
it.
Okay.
Because
So
fundamentally, I want to make something that people like at the end of the day.
yeah, and I guess that also works, right? Like I think, like we saw the open. Sorry, what was it? Workspace open. Like this is the native
Hmm.
file open dialog, and I guess
Hmm.
this is where you want to have the native support for whatever you like for the platform.
Yeah,
But yeah, fine line to walk.
exactly.
So to round this off, looking into the future, what do you think are the next big milestones for the Linux work? And even you don't have to go on the record with any guesses, but how much work do you think there's left until we have an alpha? Maybe.
So I actually have I on the record. I'm gonna say like 2 weeks of solid focused work with me and some other person. I'm currently
Hmm.
actually focusing on other things. We're kind of
Yeah.
reorganizing internally at Zed and trying to focus, knock out things, do that sort of stuff. And I'm currently pitching in on that. But if you look, there's this Linux roadmap that's pinned in our GitHub repo, and that is up to date. And really, the thing that needs to happen is I need to go make it so you can resize windows on Wayland, and then I need to just read over all of our to dos and pick which ones are we're sticking with and which aren't. Yeah, so if you scroll up a little bit, that's the nightly. That's kind of equivalent of an alpha here.
Yeah.
There's a few things to go here. Like I was mentioning, we need to get those menus in the title bar working. We need to get resizing and stuff like that working. And I just need to do a little audit of like, all right, are there any horrible bugs that need to be fixed before we can say this is good to
Yeah.
go? There's more work after that because one thing that we don't have on Linux is any media support. Like Zed does voice and video screen sharing chat and stuff like that. We don't support any of that yet. That needs to be built out
That's this.
entirely. Yeah, that's where that's when I'll feel comfortable. When we can give you the full Zed experience, top to bottom screen share and everything else on Linux, that's when I'll feel comfortable
I mean,
calling it a preview build. So preview is kind of like our equivalent of beta, by the way,
yeah.
while we're here.
So I think that gives a good picture, right? The next step, the nightly or alpha, resizing, client-side decorations. That means that client-side means we have to implement it on our side, right, to make it work for Wayland, which is in this case the server.
Yep, and that's stuff like resizing the window, like by grabbing the edge and moving it.
Yeah. Which works on X11. But so yeah, render menu, improved GPUI problems. That's what we saw, right? Like the hang up, the native thing. And then resolve all to do Linux. How many are there? Do we know? Let's do.
I actually haven't looked, so this will be fun to find out.
86. Well, there's key bindings,
86,
which is 86. That's not crazy. But here's also another thing, right, that we didn't get to, like the file system stuff, like watching file paths and whatnot for changes. That's also platform.
Oh yeah, that was fun. Yes. That one took a little bit of work to do. Honestly, though, most of these to-dos are just like look at me and make sure that this is possible or not possible. Like one thing, right? I actually think this activate call on I'm not sure if this is going to be possible on Wayland, because Wayland is very don't call us, we'll call you.
It's
as these things go. Yeah, so this one, the resolving the to-do might be as simple as deleting it and just being like, okay, we know what to do here.
Here, like this one, we need to check whether we are doing it properly. If we do, we can just delete it. Okay, cool. So that doesn't seem unsurmountable. So to wrap this up, we're coming up on time. The community has done an amazing job so far. They have contributed a ton of PRs. Dimitri did a lot of stuff implementing the Blade renderer. There's still a lot of PRs coming. Mikayla has done a fantastic job managing those PRs, merging them, reviewing them, trying it out, and it's looking good. Like, I've been using it for many hours already on Linux, and collaboration, we had one crash today. There's a bunch of little things, but things are looking good. And if somebody wants to try out the Linux build, feel free to clone the repo. There's instructions, right? If we go in our README, there's instructions in building Zed for Linux, which is not that hard. You need to update the submodules and then just install dependencies.
Don't forget the submodule in it. That's the one everyone always forgets. That's the one. We need to add that to the Linux
Rust
script.
Version, this, and then run release. And you, if you want to use it, do the release build, because this is a lot faster. And I think that is it. Mikayla, any last things we should mention about the current state of our Linux build? Anything?
It's coming along, and I think it'll come along a lot faster as we start wrapping up some of these other projects we're working on. And we, hopefully you'll be hearing about this again very soon.
Nice. All right. Then with that, bye-bye, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks.